this meeting to order. So welcome everyone to meeting number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. The committee is meeting today to study the emergency situation facing Canadians in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Most specifically for this meeting regarding the collateral effects of the pandemic. I'd like to advise the committee that to make note that the witnesses for the meeting requested for last week have confirmed availability for Friday. I would like now to welcome the witnesses for our meeting today. From the Calgary Airport Authority, we have Carmel Hunka, Vice President, People, Risk, and General Counsel. From the Center for Future Work, we have Dr. Jim Stanford, Economist and Director. And from Share Family and Community Services Society, we have Ms. Claire McLean, Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to all of you. But before we get to the witnesses, we may have some business to take care of first. Ms. Rempel-Garner, did you want to move your motion at this time?
What motion, Chair? I don't think you're at liberty to talk about motions that have been put forward, correct?
You have informed the committee of a notice of motion.
Mr. Chair, I would put forward to you before you say what you're going to say that motions that are submitted to the clerk in confidence that are disclosed without the mover putting forward would be a breach of privilege.
So I haven't actually disclosed the motion. I just noted that you filed one, and the members of the committee are all aware of the fact that you have filed one. I take it that you do not wish to move the motion at this time.
I find you raising this matter in this manner inappropriate.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll take that as a no. That being the case, we will carry on with our business. So we will start with our witnesses. Witnesses, you will have 7 minutes to for a statement. We'll start with Ms. Hunka, Vice President, People, Risk, and General Counsel for Calgary Airport Authority. Please go ahead, Ms. Hunka, 7 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Carmel Hunka, and I am the Vice President, People, Risk, and General Counsel at the Calgary Airport Authority. Airports play a critical role in ensuring the safety and health of countless travelers, thousands of employees, and the communities we serve. I'm here today to provide an update on our efforts and to call on government for increased collaboration with industry on a national approach to testing and to support innovations aimed at ensuring the safe return of air travel. I'm pleased to answer any questions you might have. The Calgary Airport Authority is an enabler to the economies of Alberta and Canada, generating billions to provincial GDP and employing directly and indirectly thousands of Albertans. YYC Calgary International Airport has proudly played a vital role in Canada's transportation ecosystem, and since the onset of the pandemic, YYC remains one of 4 Canadian airports designated to receive international travelers. As you know, COVID-19 has had a particularly devastating impact on airports, air carriers, and the thousands of complementary businesses which rely on Canada's air transportation system. The pandemic decimated demand for travel, erasing almost 25 years of passenger growth at our airport and bringing us back to the same number of guests we last saw in 1995. Our airport revenues declined 60% year over year, and we've taken on an additional $68 million in debt in 2020 in order to maintain our operations. Despite this, we remained committed to prioritizing the health and safety of passengers and employees. This commitment was recently reflected in YYC's participation in the International Border Testing Pilot Program, in the screening program now offered to our employees, and in our vision for the future. The International Border Testing Pilot Program was implemented to test inbound international passengers at YYC from early November 2020 to late February of this year. The pilot program offered travelers entering Canada from international destinations an opportunity to reduce the 14-day quarantine following 2 negative COVID-19 tests. One test was taken at the airport upon arrival and another 6 or 7 days later. In the event the first test came back negative, travelers could shorten their quarantine so long as they remained in the province and followed other restrictions. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health considered the pilot to be a vital tool in identifying variants of concern coming into the province. Overall, health officials determined a positivity rate of 1.37% for the first test and 0.69% on the second test. We share the view that this data collection has been a success and that airport testing was an effective measure in containing the virus's spread, notably by providing an important early warning system. Additionally, the first report of the Minister of Health's COVID-19 testing and screening expert advisory panel includes the deployment of rapid testing for screening as one of its recommendations. Having witnessed the value of testing and screening, we've implemented voluntary COVID-19 testing for employees and select partners working at the airport. The on-site 20-minute rapid antigen testing program provides an extra layer of protection for our employees and reduces the risk of asymptomatic transmission. We are asking our government to collaborate with us and to enable technological advancements in screening protocols, including testing at airports, the effective use of data systems, and the implementation of modernized screening infrastructure. We are also following closely on the progress of domestic and international efforts, notably by our G7 partners and the EU, in creating recognized documentation that would facilitate the movement of people across borders while the pandemic is ongoing. In the immediate term, a thoughtful, data-driven, and tailored approach to restarting domestic travel is critical. We welcome the government's participation in such collaborative efforts. In summary, a unified approach to modernized passenger screening measures and the effective use of robust data systems are vital for restoring confidence in air travel, as well as maintaining the health of air transportation employees, passengers, and the communities we serve. We hope to see the government contribute to such efforts. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Hunka. We go now to Dr. Stanford. And Doctor, I think we have, I'm advised by the clerk that we have 5 to 6 minutes per witness. So please go ahead, Dr. Stanford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet with you today and grateful for the work that you're doing, trying to help Canada through this incredible moment. I'm Jim Stanford. I'm economist and director of the Centre for Future Work, which is a labor economics think tank with offices here in Vancouver and in Sydney, Australia. As a labor economist, I will address the impacts of COVID-19 mostly in terms of their impact on workers and workplaces. And I will draw in particular on a major report from our center called 10 Ways the COVID-19 Pandemic Must Change Work for Good. And for any of you and your staff interested in following that up, that's on our website, centreforfuturework.ca. There are many overlaps, of course, between the COVID-19 pandemic and work. Workplaces were and remain a major site of contagion, and that means they're vulnerable for the people who work there and for the customers and clients that they serve. That vulnerability stems not just from where we work. It's clear there are some industries and some kinds of workplaces that are particularly vulnerable to contagion, largely based on the spatial configuration of those workplaces and how closely people have to work with other people, their colleagues or their customers. But there's also an overlap with how we work, in particular, an interaction between employment relationships and the risks of contagion in terms of the prevalence of non-standard or precarious work arrangements and vulnerability to disease. The growth of precarious or non-standard work arrangements where people are not working in sort of regular full-time permanent positions with normal employment benefits and COVID is experienced in a number of ways. First of all, workers in non-standard positions typically do not have access to paid sick leave, which means there's economic compulsion on them to continue working even when they should be isolating. Secondly, people in non-standard work situations are more often trying to make a living by cobbling together income from multiple jobs, 2, 3, or even 4 jobs at the same time, which means they're working at multiple workplaces, which naturally enhances the risk of them sharing the virus between different locations. And we saw how catastrophic that was in terms of the role of workers in non-standard situations, precarious employment relationships, and the spread of COVID across multiple long-term care facilities in the earlier stages of the pandemic. Also, just the general absence of stability and permanence in work arrangements, the lack of training and skills acquisition in precarious work situations, and the lack of channels through which workers in those jobs could express their concerns and needs also contributes to a greater vulnerability. In terms of the impact of the pandemic on employment, we have seen the pandemic greatly exacerbate inequality in employment outcomes that was already visible before the pandemic. There was an incredible concentration of the losses of employment hours and income in the initial months of the pandemic, in particular sectors of the labor market, including particular industries, the face-to-face industries that had to be shut down immediately, like retail, hospitality, arts and recreation, personal services, many transportation functions. Also demographic and gender groups. Young people experienced much worse job losses. Women experienced more job losses than men. And of course, the type of job. The level of work of employment losses for part-time workers and temporary workers was 4 or 5 times greater than job losses experienced among permanent staff. And in fact, there's many staff, of course, in relatively good jobs who were able to do their jobs from home, who didn't lose any income as a result of the pandemic. So in this way, the pandemic has greatly exacerbated the consequences of inequality, and in my judgment, will impose lasting economic, social, health, and fiscal costs on Canada unless our post-COVID policy response is fundamentally directed at helping those who need it the most. In terms of what we do to ensure a stronger labor market and stronger employment and safer jobs coming out of the pandemic, I will refer you to the full study where we have a 10-point agenda, including issues like reconfiguring spatial relationships in workplaces, the provision of paid sick leave, which is an essential step, measures to enhance the stability and well-being of working from home, and of course, measures to address this overarching problem of precarious employment and how that contributed to negative health outcomes. So I would recommend the full study for a deeper view. Fixing work after COVID is going to be a substantial long-term task. It will have to involve all stakeholders, federal and provincial governments, employers, regulators, unions, educational institutions, and more. But in my judgment, it is essential. The pandemic was a wake-up call that exposed fractures in our labor market and our employment relationships that were visible before the pandemic, and now we realize those are harmful not just to the workers affected, but they're harmful to public health. And in order to make work better, but also make public health safer, we have to fix work coming out of the pandemic. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll go now to Share Family and Community Services Society. Ms. McLean. Ms. McLean, please go ahead. 5 to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. It's really a pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Claire McLean. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Share Society. Share is a registered charity. We're somewhat unique in terms of social service agencies in that we don't just serve one demographic, such as seniors, or one area of need, such as autism. We really are here to support members of our community during times of vulnerability. And it is our deep set belief that if we can wrap services around people during those times of vulnerability, that they can come out on the other side with better outcomes. And so as a result of that belief, Share delivers a wide range and different buckets of services. We have services that address financial vulnerability, such as the food bank, a rent bank, and employment programs and affordable housing. We have services that support the vulnerability of mental health, including counseling and addiction services. We have services to support the vulnerability of aging, including social connection services for our seniors, transportation to medical appointments. We have services that address the vulnerability of disability, including services for children and youth with special needs. We have services that support the vulnerability associated with being a newcomer or a refugee to our country. And finally, we have programs that support the vulnerability of early and middle childhood, including parenting programs. And so through this wide range of services, SHARE supports about 22,000 people each year in the cities of Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, Port Moody, New Westminster, Anmore, and Belcarra. And when the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, SHARE was one of those classified as an essential service provider. And so our food bank has not missed a single day of food hamper distribution. And across all of our programs, our staff have done a really amazing and admirable job at coming up with creative solutions to ensure that people in our community could continue to access the supports that they needed. I know that the committee has already heard expert testimony around the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on vulnerable members of our community, and I can add my voice as further witness to that fact. We cannot talk about the impacts of this pandemic without talking about the financially vulnerable members of our community. These are folks who are at higher risk of contracting the virus. They lack paid sick leave and therefore are more likely to attend work if they have symptoms or have to work alongside someone doing the same. The financially vulnerable are more likely to live with roommates or extended family, thus expanding the contacts they experience on a day-to-day basis. These members of our community are often employed as casual or part-time workers with multiple employers at multiple locations, again, expanding their contacts. So in addition to being at higher risk of just becoming sick, the financially vulnerable members of our population are also at a higher risk for the collateral damage of this pandemic. They are the ones more likely to have been laid off by struggling businesses, and they do not have the same access to mental health supports, childcare, domestic supports, recreation services, or even nutritious food. You cannot talk about the emergency situation facing Canadians as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic without talking about financial vulnerability. But there is good news on this. Some of the government's actions during the height of the pandemic were very effective at helping mitigate the impacts on financially vulnerable people. We heard from the community members that SHARE serves that the CERB payments were critical to ensuring the well-being of their families. In addition, the funding for supports for food banks were incredibly impactful. As a food bank that serves over 2,000 people every month, I can tell you that the funding SHARE received allowed us to feed more households and get them the nutritious food that they needed. We appreciate these efforts and thank the government for their actions. And as we look ahead, I would implore this committee to consider two specific recommendations. Firstly, a continuation of the supports above. Just as the financially vulnerable members of our community were hit harder by this pandemic, they will take longer to recover. This cannot be measured in months, but rather will take years. Sustained government funding for food banks and programs that continue to put money directly into the hands of those in need in our communities are effective and they are necessary. And secondly, infrastructure funding for the community services sector is desperately needed. While attention and funding is justifiably placed on primary care and emergency care hospitals and services, it is the community-based services, such as those delivered by SHARE, that completes this cycle of support for our citizens. A baby girl who's born at 26 weeks gestation is sent home from her local hospital with a feeding tube and dire predictions for her long-term developmental and academic success. It is the speech language pathologist and the physiotherapist and the occupational therapist at SHARE who work with her parents so that she can learn to drink from a bottle, take her first steps, and say her first words. It is through the work of SHARE and her family that she arrives at kindergarten, never having stepped foot back in that hospital since her infancy. And similarly, for the senior who's using alcohol to manage his loneliness and his depression and had to visit the emergency room after a particularly bad fall one evening, it is the SHARE counselors who help him find a better way to cope, SHARE's legal advocacy and our housing teams who help make sure he doesn't get evicted and end up homeless with more frequent visits to the ER. Our nation's healthcare system does not work without social service, community-based organizations such as SHARE. And yet we are consistently denied any type of basic infrastructure support, funding for IT or administration needs. To continue to starve this sector of supports places the health and well-being of all Canadians at risk. Honorable members of the committee, as someone who has done this work and had the privilege of working in the field of community services for over 20 years and has done that work in BC, Ontario, and Alberta, I can tell you that these stories are not unique to the Tri-Cities or to Share. The need to support the most vulnerable members of our community span our entire country, and the solution of both direct financial support as well as sustained and conscious infrastructure funding for the community services sector is also one that could be applied nationally. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. We will start our rounds of questions at this point. We will start with Ms. Rimple-Garner. Ms. Rimple-Garner, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with questions for the Calgary Airport Authority and Ms. Hunka. Ms. Hunka, you, if I'm not mistaken, you have your AGM coming up this week. That's correct?
Yes, it's on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time.
So you mentioned to us that you've, in the last year, I believe, amassed about $68 million in debt. What do your financials look like in terms of cash flow for the next few months? Like, what will you be telling folks at your AGM this week in the context of what you can and can't say?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Rimple-Garner. We will be advising that our cash flow position, we will be advising of a $23 million deficit in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. Our revenues were down about 60%, as we indicated. Our expenses were down about 38%. As you can appreciate, an airport has significant infrastructure, and while we've taken decisive action and reduced significant capital programs, we need to expend regular resources on things like keeping our runways clear and when there's snow and things like that. So we can only reduce our expenses so much. So what we will be advising is a cash deficit of $23 million.
So what does that mean? Like, how long do you guys sort of have to operate with that type of a deficit projection?
Our projection is that we will need to borrow an additional, in addition to the $68 million, probably another $200 million over the course of the next 2 years in order to remain cash positive. If we have to continue to borrow and we see the same types of situation, we may be cash flow negative and our liquidity runs out sometime in 2023.
So essentially what you're saying is if things don't turn around, there is a risk of insolvency for the Calgary International Airport sometime in 2023.
We certainly will need to and are committed to maintaining and taking on additional debt as we need to. That's not the direction that we would like to go. We would be hopeful that we could find a way to fund recovery and bring back our operation.
So in terms of what could fund recovery, you mentioned a lot about the Calgary Border Pilot Program. When that was canceled, were you given any evidence or rationale in terms of why that cancellation was needed in terms of public health outcome?
We were advised that the pilot program was being canceled as a result of the implementation of the new testing that was being implemented Canada-wide.
Were you shown any evidence or data that showed that the new system was more effective than the old system in terms of public health outcomes?
We were not provided with that evidence or that information. We participated in the change as a result of the order in council and participated in the switch over and supported the government.
So essentially, you are in a situation where you are having to look at significant borrowing due to measures that were put in place without any clarity on why they were needed for public health outcomes or any clarity on when they were going to end.
Well, certainly we support any testing that is being done at the airport, whether that would be for domestic travelers, which is what we would like to see, or for arriving passengers. We do believe the pilot program provided significant and strong data and information with respect to what the risk was from travelers arriving, and so we continue to support that.
Sure. Have you been given any information on when, let's say, the Alberta pilot program might come back into place, or when any benchmarks in which some of the restrictions that you've been operating under might be lifted?
We have not received any of that information at this point. We
Have you
continue
asked
to
for
support. We have not gone and asked specifically for that information. We continue to participate in conversations and telephone calls with Transport Canada and otherwise with respect to the continued restrictions that are in place.
Transport Canada has not provided any information in terms of benchmarks on when restrictions might be eased.
No, they have not provided those directly to us. We have, as I've indicated, asked for and have indicated that we are prepared to and wish to participate in as much testing at the airports as possible. Sure. In order to enable and support recovery.
If things keep going the way that they are right now under the current system, would it be fair to say that the airport authority is in major trouble in about a year's time?
We certainly are looking at our forecasts over the course of the next year. We are actually forecasting for 2021 and will be advising at our AGM that we're forecasting 5.1 million passengers compared to 5.7 million passengers in 2020. 5.1 million passengers is the same passenger level as in 1995. And with those low levels of passengers, certainly we have to
quickly, with the time I have left, the April 21st OIC ends in 10 days, and you're telling me that the government has told you nothing in terms of what might happen at that point in time, and we're 10 days away.
We have not received any indication. We continue to plan for supporting the continued testing should it be required.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rempel-Garner. We go now to Mr. Kellaway. Mr. Kellaway, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and hello to my colleagues and to the witnesses today. Thank you so much. I had a few questions that I prepared this morning, and I sort of erased them because of the testimony that has been given today, which I find very, very important. And you know, whether we're talking about food security or food banks and sustainable funding, I hear you. I've been there. Or the need to build on the 25 million rapid tests that we have out there now. It's a lot, but we need more, and it's an important work in progress. But Dr. Stanford, I'm going to focus on you, and I want to thank you for your testimony today. So as a community developer, I've always found economists like yourself are fundamental in helping to provide insight on how we can move communities forward and the country forward. So as you know, our government implemented a number of support measures for Canadians through the pandemic, most notably the CERB. So for me, anyway, in essence, it's been acting as a basic income for those that need it the most. So I've been an advocate for basic income in my riding in the Atlantic region. I'm wondering if you can speak to your thoughts around a basic income, and if you think a national basic income framework is something that could help Canadians as we enter into our post-pandemic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the question, and also for your very generous remarks about economists at the beginning. We don't usually come off that well in people's estimation. More often, I hear that an economist is described as someone who's good with numbers but didn't have the personality to become an accountant.
It all depends on the economist.
Right. Yeah. Your remarks are very much appreciated. Thank you. Well, the federal government's very fast and very powerful injections of income support last year were absolutely vital to us traversing this crisis as well as we did, and obviously it's still, despite that, has been a very, very painful, disruptive experience for millions of Canadians. But the CERB in particular was vital to helping Canadians imagine how they could get through with the job losses and income losses that they experienced. The money was delivered very quickly, and it was delivered with a relatively accessible qualifying requirements, which was vital as well, because the traditional rules of the employment insurance system before the pandemic would have left most Canadians out in the cold without any support whatsoever. So In this regard, the pandemic highlighted the flaws in our previous income security system. The CERB, because of its encompassing nature, had some of the characteristics of a basic income, and I think many observers have noted that and noted how important that was. The level of the CERB, $500 per week, did seem to be an amount that was sufficient to meet the basic necessities of life for people in most households if you didn't have special needs of some kind. And so the analogy to a basic income type system was obvious. And I think that was in a way, a positive experience. On the other hand, it also showed that a universal payment of a benefit like that would be very significant in terms of its fiscal implications. I am not. I'm not. I don't have a sort of clear judgment one way or the other on basic income as a specific policy goal, as a direction to head towards. The concept that every Canadian should be entitled to a standard of living that meets their basic necessities of life is an absolute valid one. And there are ways to get at that principle, to advance that principle, that don't necessarily involve a one big package of a universal basic income. And we see this happening already through things like the child tax benefit, the proposed disability benefit that has some of the indications of a basic income for people with disabilities, the improvement in the EI system so that more people can qualify. In a way, those are all different directions to get towards a basic income situation without necessarily having the one big silver bullet, if you like, to try and address that problem. I tend to think that's ultimately going to be more effective than trying to imagine a great big redesign of all of our social programs, particularly because there are some programs today that offer more than a basic income would be providing, and necessarily so for people who have particular needs. So I guess to sum up, I would say the concept and the principle of a basic income, that every Canadian should have the necessities of life, should be a guiding light in our social policy design. But there are many ways to get at that goal ultimately.
Thank you, Dr. Stafford. A very interesting conversation, one that I think we need to have a deeper one as a country. Sticking to reality on the ground, in my riding, we're seeing a lot of folks over the past 12 months, 13 months, coming back from different parts of the country to stay in Nova Scotia because it's a safe place to be, but it's also in many ways home and always will be home. So we've seen a lot of transfer of people working in downtown Toronto and coming to Cape Breton or other parts of Nova Scotia. So I find the dynamic of virtual learning, virtual working, remote learning, whatever you want to call it, really, really key here. So I'm wondering if you could briefly summarize your work from home findings to summarize your work from home findings to the committee on what you think needs to be done to ensure work from home occurs in a safe, sustainable, and fair manner until we're able to send folks back to their regular workplaces when it's safe to do so. I think that the Canadian public would be interested to learn your findings on that.
Oh, that's a great question. Working from home, of course, has exploded during the pandemic. Over 5 million Canadians are working from home now, over a quarter of all people who are employed. I don't expect it to stay at that level once the vaccines are out and people have taken them, hopefully, and we get the contagion under control, but it will certainly remain elevated compared to where it was before the pandemic. It isn't a no-brainer. There's many issues that have to be addressed. You can't just work on your couch. You have to have a proper setup. You have to have good ergonomics, lighting, safety. You have to have proper rules regarding hours of work so that your job doesn't spill over into a sort of 24/7 type of arrangement just because you've got the material at home. You also have to have fair arrangements around compensation for extra costs from working from home. Another one I'll end this with is protection against undue monitoring and surveillance digitally by employers of people who are working from home. If we put those types of protections in place, then working from home can be a great permanent solution.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr.
Doctor.
Kellaway. Nous allons maintenant, Monsieur.
We will now go to Mr. Tidio. Mr. Tidio, you have the floor. 6 minutes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't hear you very well. Can you hear me? But maybe the next time you could raise your volume a bit. I'll begin with Ms. McLean, please. It's clear that since the first wave and the second, and now we're going into the third wave, unfortunately, Everyone who has come to speak to our committee has said that our networks for health and social services and the realities you were discussing earlier are realities that are connected to adequate funding for health and especially social services, but they're always neglected when it comes to funding in our health networks. Experts have told us that the pandemic highlighted that chronic underfunding that at the end of the day is related to prevention, a health vector. In faculties of medicine, students are taught that prevention is the first determinant of health. And after that was said, it was as if nothing had been said because we're putting out fires and the network is overwhelmed. You've said that the pandemic is highlighting all of the issues and the weak links in social services. Do you believe that it's time for us, and contrary to what the government claims, that it's time for the government to put in place a significant increase, like that 28 billion requested by the provinces to health transfers, so that we can, as soon as possible, restructure our networks and get through this pandemic in a sustainable way? Currently, the government is saying that we need to wait until after the pandemic to see what will be done, but really, we should right away give people the capacity to plan and orient programs and to increase the basket of services for those who provide services. So that would be the provinces in Quebec. What do you think?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the social service sector, I think we are a nimble sector, and I think we are ready. And I think with additional funding, we can ramp up very quickly. We saw that when the opportunity arose during the height of the pandemics, first and second waves, we're seeing it now. And I do think with additional funding, we could be absolutely a very quick part of the solution to this issue.
Donc, ce que je comprends, c'est...
So what I've understood is that you think the government, rather than say they'll address the funding for health and social services, well, you think that funding should arrive now so that we can sustainably get through this pandemic and address issues that weren't addressed at the beginning. That is to say that there'd been chronic underfunding for about 30 years. And if we want to address that, we need to readjust our priorities. And our priority now is health. So there are collateral impacts on the economy, as Dr. Stanford said earlier. So that's what you're asking for, right?
Absolutely. I think the funding is urgently needed and we could use it immediately. And the one thing, just, as kudos to the economist at the table today, Dr. Stanford, I think as well to keep in mind is that, for example, our organization, 80% of the people we employ also live in our community. So social services also are a fantastic way. By investing in them, you're actually investing in the economy of local communities as well. We tend to employ a significant proportion of women, of working moms. So this is something that gives back to local economies as much as it also sustains the social and health infrastructure of them.
Absolument.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll quickly ask a question because with Ms. Anka, I don't have much time left, but what do you think of vaccine passports or vaccine certifications? There's been some discussion around that with some major events, in the context of some major events. Do you have a position on that, Ms. Hunka, on that measure, on whether there would be challenges related to that? What is your position on that measure of vaccine passports?
Thank you for the question. Certainly, the airport authorities do support the opening of safe travel corridors and the use of a vaccine passport or some type of notification that could identify vaccines. We feel that vaccine passports in conjunction with continued testing would enable the traveling public to gain confidence and us to provide a safe travel experience. And so we would support such activity.
Est-ce que vous voyez des difficultés?
Do you see any specific challenges to administering those passports, to verifying whether they're legitimate passports?
Certainly, that would be an absolutely critical and important piece to the vaccine passport. We have seen that there has been very good enforcement with respect to the pre-departure PCR testing. And so we would consider that it would be very important to make sure that we've got critical alignment with the vaccine passports, perhaps with people's own passports from Canada or otherwise.
Merci, Monsieur Thériault.
Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
To Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Dr. Stanford, if I can start with you. In a January 16th op-ed in the Toronto Star, you wrote the following: anyone concerned about the economy should be pleading for fast, powerful lockdowns, not demanding a return to business as usual. The correlation between controlling contagion and economic recovery is clear across Canadian provinces. Those with fewer COVID cases have achieved the strongest employment results since the pandemic hit. I'm wondering if you could expand on that and if you have any specific recommendations to give us as federal politicians for how we can implement that concept.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Well, I was in that commentary confronting the argument that has been heard from some provinces and some premiers that we cannot intervene to try and stop the contagion with effective measures because it would be too damaging to the economy. And I think the evidence is clear both interprovincially in Canada and internationally that view has it exactly backwards, that the recovery of the economy absolutely depends on a fast and powerful effort to stop contagion. And that is what creates the conditions for a sustained reopening. And so this idea that we should just tolerate COVID in our communities in order to keep restaurants open and stores open and so on is very short-sighted. Internationally, that evidence is very clear. I mentioned at the beginning, I do some work in Australia as well, which has had a very strong and effective COVID response, and their economy is largely open now and back to pre-pandemic levels of activity. The same goes for other countries like New Zealand, South Korea, Taiwan. In Canada's case, there's many different factors, of course, which affect the degree of contagion in different locations. But the places that said, no, we have to go easy on the shutdowns because it's bad for the economy, that has not panned out at all. If anything, their economic and employment results have been worse. Now, the health response, of course, is largely a provincial responsibility. So I guess the federal role here would be to support provinces in trying to take the effective actions that are required, including through those income support measures, support for small businesses that are affected, and so on. That's how I think the federal government could facilitate the provinces taking the stronger actions that are essential if, in fact, we're going to protect both public health and the economy.
Thanks. In the Public Policy Forum, you wrote this. You said, in retrospect, both employers and regulators took the safety of many workers for granted when the pandemic first erupted. There were many occupations, from taxi and rideshare drivers to meatpacking workers to workers in crowded oil sands and farm labor camps, for which the risk of infection was obvious, but little was done until devastating outbreaks occurred. What steps can the federal government take to ensure workers are better protected in the future?
Thank you. First of all, I think it is definitely the case that the health response to the risk of workplace contagion was inadequate from the beginning. There was a lot of attempt initially to minimize the risks. Perhaps one of the The worst possible examples would be instances like the Cargill meat facility in Brooks, Alberta, or the Amazon warehouse in Brampton, Ontario, where you don't need to be an occupational health and safety expert to understand that those were going to be very dangerous places during the pandemic, but regulators either willfully ignored or soft pedaled the sort of steps that would be required to protect the workers and their families, and ultimately the whole communities in those places. Again, the federal government's role, you have limited responsibility, of course, for direct health and safety in the federal jurisdiction. So that's important. You can set a role model there with absolutely top of the class workplace health and safety standards around contagion. And then again, you can facilitate the provinces doing a better job, including through the income supports. And this will neutralize this false economy versus health trade-off that is still circulating out there. Now we're in the midst of a third wave that obviously could have been handled much, much better if we'd been stronger on limiting contagion from the beginning. And by providing the income support as well as regulatory guidance, I think the federal government has an important supplementary role to play in that effort.
Now, you've mentioned comparative examples. You also wrote that formally structured voice mechanisms are on the wane in Canadian workplaces. Elsewhere in the world, providing workers with regular protected channels for voice and input is considered a basic democratic right protected by law. In many European countries, for example, firms must establish work councils composed of elected employee representatives who participate in certain workplace decisions and monitor local conditions and practices. How does Canada rate in this regard, and do you have any suggestions to give the federal government for how we can improve our record in that regard?
This question gets at a remark I made in my opening remarks about the overlap between insecure and precarious forms of employment and enhanced risk of contagion in workplaces. Because in very insecure jobs, workers come and go. They are not treated as a lasting asset. They're treated as a disposable productive input, and they're hired and fired on a just-in-time basis. In that type of workplace, you do not get the stability, the training, the knowledge, the information flows that are necessary if all members of a workplace are going to respond to a challenge like this pandemic. And so in this way, the conditions of precarious work make the problem worse. But even in permanent jobs in Canada, we have undeveloped structures for communication, input, guidance, and voice between workers and managers and employers. One exception to this, interestingly enough, is in the workplace health and safety area. All jurisdictions, including the federal jurisdiction, compel employers above a certain size to establish joint health and safety committees in those workplaces, precisely because they recognize that facilitating knowledge and communication is crucial for better safety outcomes. Those lessons could be applied and extended in the case of contagion, and indeed to other pressing workplace topics as well.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. So we're almost out of time. I think we'll try and shoehorn in a very fast second round. I think if each party takes 2 minutes, we'll go forward with that. So we'll start with Mr. Barlow, please, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I want to go back to Ms. Hunka, and you were talking about the success of the pilot testing program at the Calgary International Airport. And my colleague mentioned that the order in council is going to be ending on April 21st on the hotel quarantines. And I just want to give you a chance to explain that a little bit more, that you could have a massive change in what your airport is going to be asked to do in 9 days, and you don't have any information on whether or not that order in council is going to be extended and the pilot testing program will be reinstated or not?
We are continuing to support the testing program that will be at the airport, and we are actually utilizing that same testing facility for what we are using for our employees. So we will continue to have that facility available. We have been incredibly resilient as far as providing for testing and to be able to ramp up or ramp down. So we don't have any information as to whether it will be continuing, and on the basis that we don't have that information, we are proceeding as if it is continuing.
Was any concerns raised, Ms. Hunka, prior to the cancellation of the pilot test program? Everything I heard that it was extremely successful, and you talked about the test numbers. 0.69% on the second test, 1% on the first test. Everything I've heard, this testing program was extremely successful. Do you see any reason why it would have been canceled? I know that this was a national issue, but were there any concerns raised with that program prior to the cancellation?
All indications were that this pilot program was successful, including by the Public Health Agency of Canada acknowledging the success of the program. So as far as we were concerned, it was a highly successful program, but for consistency with the rest of the country, it was ended.
Or I guess we could have taken that pilot program and put that across the country instead of imposing hotel quarantines. But thank you very much for your time, Ms. Hunka.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. We go now to Dr. Pawlowski. Dr. Pawlowski, please go ahead, 2 minutes.
My questions are for Dr. Stanford. You talked a bit about Australia and how Australia seems to have done better than Canada. In Ontario, the ICUs are overflowing. We just instituted a stay-at-home order. What did Australia do differently in terms of implementing increased measures requiring social isolation? What did they do that we didn't do? And secondly, in Canada, it's obviously a matter of provincial jurisdiction, but is it also the same in Australia with each state having to decide which measures to implement, and was there any federal oversight? Thanks.
Oh, great questions, Dr. Pawlowski. Thank you. On the jurisdiction issue in Australia, it's similar to Canada. The main health response was led by state governments, and they were in charge of all of the different features around distancing, lockdowns, testing, etc. The federal government did one thing, and that was they did close the borders quite effectively early in the pandemic. And in retrospect, that was a good thing to do. I know it was a hard decision. Then it was up to the states, and they included border closures within the country that were much stricter than anywhere in Canada other than the Atlantic. They've endured some really serious lockdowns in Melbourne, Australia, 99 days, where you were required to stay within 5 kilometers of your house, and there were very limited reasons why you could leave the house. So more strict than anything we experienced, but it worked. And now they've got the benefits for that sacrifice, and in other states as well. So the Australian evidence is very clear. A forceful, powerful response to contagion is the best thing you can do for the economy.
Do I have? Thanks, Ron.
2 seconds left. Thank you, Doctor. We go now, Monsieur Thériault. Allons-y, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Thériault, go ahead, please. 2 minutes. Yes, to continue in the same vein, to compare what's done elsewhere with what's done here. Here, we tend to consider that at the first opportunity, we need to try to reopen, increase more flexibility. And what you've said is that, for example, in Australia, between regions, there were stricter controls than what's happened here. And there's the whole continental aspect of things as well, of course. But what you're recommending, what you're saying, is that opening up all the time at the first opportunity isn't necessarily as helpful to the economy as you would think. Could you elaborate on that, please? And earlier you were talking about reconfiguring workplaces. Do you have specific examples? Thank you.
Deux choses différentes.
So 2 different things there.
Thank you. The Australian case shows that the faster and more comprehensively you shut down interactions, the better your chances of stopping the contagion from taking hold and spreading. So I mentioned the severe lockdown in Melbourne's case, but the rest of the country learned from that. So every time you get an outbreak now, and it does happen from time to time, they very quickly put the whole city down under another lockdown order for 3 or 4 or 5 days. And yes, we get the usual complaints from business groups that they're going to suffer from lost business, but they're actually being done a favor, because by stopping the contagion that quickly, you're allowing those businesses to reopen. So this is where you need government to take a forceful long-term view and do what's right for the whole community.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Merci, Monsieur Thériault.
Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
Davies, Mr. Davies, 2 minutes, please.
Dr. Stanford, your long work with championing the Canadian auto industry is well known. I'm curious about what you see on a macro post-COVID economic perspective in terms of national self-sufficiency. We saw that early on Canada didn't have self-sufficiency in PPE and essential medical supplies. I'm just wondering, do you have any suggestions to give the federal government how we can position the Canadian economy for greater national economic security in the future going forward?
Well, this is certainly a moment where we have to think about what is our role going to be in the global economy after the pandemic. There's no doubt that some industries are going to change forever because of this pandemic. New industries are going to grow. Some industries are going to face challenges for years. Obviously, as we've heard, the aerospace and air transportation sector is going to take years to recover from this. So I'm an advocate for a very sort of forceful, engaged kind of sector development strategy from both the federal and provincial governments, engaging other stakeholders, private businesses, educational institutions, unions, and so on. And there's lots of opportunities for Canada to leverage its technological know-how, skilled workers, strong social inclusion in Canada into successful industries of the future. Examples of that obviously would be around renewable energy and all of the inputs and downstream benefits that come from that. Health technology obviously is going to be a huge one. We know we can't do vaccines all by ourselves. No country can do that, but we can certainly have a much better foothold in the global supply chain of modern medicine and modern medical equipment than we have. And that requires planning, public investment, co-investment, and active policy rather than just sitting back and thinking that the markets will take care of it. I think there is an opportunity after the pandemic to think more about public sector leadership in all areas of the economy, including industrial and sector development.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you're muted.
Okay, I do some of my best speeches muted. So anyway, that brings us to a close on our round of questions. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for sharing their time with us this morning and for your expertise, and your testimony is most helpful to us. So with that, we will suspend and bring in the next panel. Thank you all. We are now resumed. We are resuming meeting number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. We are meeting today to study the emergency situation facing Canadians in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, and most specifically at this point regarding the collateral effects of the pandemic. On this panel, we have, as an individual, we have Ms. Linda McQuaig, journalist and author. We have, from the Canadian Association of Radiologists, we have Dr. Michael Barry, President, and we may later have Dr. Gilles Soulet, Vice President. With the Fitness Industry Council of Canada, we have Mr. Scott Wilderman, President. And with the Tri-City Transition Society, we'll have Ms. Carol Metz, Executive Director, Consultant, and Leadership Coach. Thank you all for being here today. We will start with witness statements. We will start with Ms. McQuaig. Ms. McQuaig, please go ahead. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to say how much I appreciate this opportunity to address the committee today. And I'd like to talk about Canada's lack of domestic vaccine production facilities, which I think has been one of the key problems in the Canada's slow
Ms.
vaccine
McQuaig,
rollout.
I wonder if you could move your mic just a little bit away from your mouth.
Away from my mouth? Okay.
Just a little bit, yeah. You're getting popping.
Okay. Is that better?
It's better for me. We'll see if the translators are okay with it. Please carry
on. Okay. So, yeah, so I think there's a key problem behind Canada's slow vaccine rollout. Last month, the Trudeau government attempted to correct this problem by investing $415 million in the French pharmaceutical giant Sanofi. And the idea was to help Sanofi expand its vaccine production facilities in Canada. Now, in my opinion, this is not the answer. This is not the solution to the problem of our limited vaccine capacity. On the contrary, I would go so far as to say it's a reckless use of public money, hundreds of millions of dollars of public money. In announcing the investment, the federal industry minister said that Ottawa was currently in negotiations with the company Sanofi over a contract that would give Canadians priority access to Sanofi's vaccines during a future pandemic. But, I mean, hold on. Well, surely it would have been better to postpone that $415 million announcement until after Sanofi had agreed to the government's terms to give Canadians priority access. I mean, without that key term being nailed down, we really just are keeping our fingers crossed that Sanofi will deliver for us. I think in some ways this reveals just how vulnerable Canada is now that we no longer have a domestic vaccine capacity that we control. And of course, we once did have that capacity. We had Connaught Labs, a Canadian publicly owned enterprise and one of the world's leading vaccine producers. I mean, for 7 decades, Connaught developed and produced a range of vaccines, and it provided those vaccines to Canadians at cost and provided them to other countries at affordable prices. Connaught operated without government financial support, and yet it even made profits, which it reinvested in medical research. Connaught's research scientists were among the best in the world. They contributed to some of the key medical breakthroughs of the 20th century, including insulin, penicillin, polio vaccine. Connaught even played a vital role in the World Health Organization's global vaccination campaign to rid the world of smallpox. Yet, despite this remarkable record, Connaught was privatized by the Mulroney government in the 1980s. Now, the Connaught facilities still operate today in Toronto, but they're now owned by Sanofi. So, in fact, Ottawa's $415 million investment in Sanofi is going to expand the old Connaught facilities. But Canada no longer has control over what happens there. Now, there is, of course, much to lament about the sell-off of this spectacular Canadian company, Canadian enterprise, Connaught Labs. But that is history. That is history. And the key point now is that it's not too late to create a new version of Connaught. And that would be a publicly owned biotech company that could produce vaccines and other medications and could be counted on to put Canada and Canadian needs first, which was what Connaught always did. So rather than investing $415 million in a private company that we don't control, we can invest that money instead in a company that we do control. Now, next week's budget would be a perfect opportunity to announce the launch of a new publicly owned biotech enterprise. Now, I realize that may sound ambitious, but it wasn't too ambitious for the visionary Canadians who created Connaught in the early 20th century. So let's see if we can't own that podium again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McQuaig. We go now to the Canadian Associations of Radiologists. Dr. Barry, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. McKinnon, and thank you very much to the committee. I'll just be as quick as I can to work through the statement. I want to thank all of you for all this work that you're doing in this difficult time, and it is a difficult time. Although we're not through COVID-19 yet, we will be soon, we hope. And it's because of work like yours and people on the front trenches that we'll get there. But now is the time to plan about our reopening. And what does Canada's healthcare system in our country look like after COVID-19? As many of you know, imaging, radiology, and high technology is really the centerpiece of medical system in the 21st century. Every branch of medical care in Canada and worldwide is reliant on a comprehensive radiology imaging program to look after our preventive care and our active care. We are the single most important infrastructure investment in the healthcare system. Much like roads, bridges, seaports, airports, to our transportation networks, we are an investment and not a cost center. I'd like to share some observations from COVID-19 and some of the effects. Initially, COVID-19 wait times. COVID-19 wait times were postponed, or imaging wait times because of COVID-19 has left hundreds of thousands of people in a long wait list that was already quite long, and we have found that probably there's been about a 50% reduction in medical imaging and screening services, non-urgent in particular, that we've neglected because of COVID-19. No fault of anybody, just the fact of the matter. Cancer doesn't wait for COVID. It's created a real sense of urgency, causing an overwhelming backlog in medical imaging services from coast to coast. Before the pandemic, patients were waiting in Canada an average of 50 to 82 days for CAT scanning and 89 days for MRI. These are between 20 and 52 days longer than recommended from the OECD wait lists. And because of the COVID-19 impact, the wait lists are even longer. This is especially concerning for cancer patients, breast screening, colorectal screening, just diagnostic screening for people who are waiting at home, afraid to go to the hospital because of the first wave, second wave, and now the third wave. I can remember, and I think I've spoken to you about it, the committee, about an initial case that came through our hospital here in St. John, New Brunswick, where I practice and have for 30 years, where a young man in his 30s came in about 6 or 8 weeks after his initial symptoms and found out he had a high-grade glioblastoma that was, he was waiting. He was too afraid to come in because of COVID, and he waited for his treatment. So he came in, and by that time, he had a high-grade glioblastoma. late intervention, and he did not do well, needless to say. And that was concerning. We have a lot of patients that present at emergency room with obstructions of their bowel because of colon obstruction, because they've been rectal bleeding and they're afraid to go to the hospital. We see that unfortunately every day. The Maritimes hasn't been as impacted as the rest of Canada, but I can assure you, nationally, we're hearing stories on a daily basis from our colleagues from coast to coast. We had a recent report from the CMA about clearing the backlog and the cost to return to wait times pre-pandemic levels. Wait time delays do cause an additional economic cost of the system. An MRI scan waiting 52 days costs our healthcare and economic system approximately $377 million a year. CT scans waiting 33 days, approximately $377 million on a yearly basis. According to Deloitte, the procedures that had the highest funding requirements, including MRI and CT, are MRI and CT scans, and they make up about 75% of all procedures across Canada. That gets to our point, close to our ask. As I've spoken to a number of you before in person and on Zoom, the Conference Board of Canada published a report in 2019 talking about how far behind Canada is in capital equipment. We're by far the worst off in capital equipment, with 75% of our capital equipment being at almost of end of life. And we've had a request on the table with all parties for a commitment immediately of 1.5 billion over the next 5 years. And that was a pre-COVID ask. That was an attempt to bring our national wait list to a more acceptable standard. There are still many patients waiting for months and unable to work. And we have estimates from the Conference Board that the cost in the economy is upwards of $5 billion in 2020. Our response to COVID-19 has been fast and rapid based on our able to pivot and change our healthcare. We're already very virtual, as many of you know, in radiology, but it's imperative that the diagnosis of injury, chronic illness in particular, and acute illnesses can't wait. We have actually pivoted very quickly, working at home because of our ability to work at home when the time came, and in the hospital to get our wait lists in order, but yet we still continue to fall behind. There are many technical requests that go into this ask, which would include artificial intelligence, new equipment that's updated that will make our equipment or make our turnaround times quicker and faster, and enable us to address this tremendous backlog. In closing, this part of it, the CAR is asking for $1.5 billion over the next 5 years to support Canadians and ensure their capacity to integrate technology such as AI to help run the system more efficiently. This is an investment, not a cost, and it'll get people back to work, look after our sick people, chronic people, and get our cancer screening back to what it should be and beyond. This is not unprecedented for the federal government to take charge in this, because there was, as many of you know, there was a targeted investment in 2005 and 2006 by the Paul Martin government, who put $2 billion in equipment targeted for imaging, and it reduced our wait time significantly. And I think a number of you have seen our radiology reports from the Conference Board showing the impact of that investment, which really has tapered off since 2013, and now we're back where we were in 2004 and 2005. Our second ask is strike a federal task force to look at the health, human resources, and infrastructure components, such as weight rooms, workspace, air ventilation, consulting areas to support new equipment, because the way we practice medicine in 2021 and in a post-COVID world and a possible another pandemic, we'll have to be much better prepared. That's it, Mr. Chairman. I could go on forever, but I'm available for questions, so I'll stand by for questions.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll go now to the Fitness Industry Council of Canada, Mr. Wilderman. President, please go ahead, Mr. Wilderman. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. So the Fitness Industry Council of Canada, we represent over 6,000 fitness facilities ranging from single boutiques to large regional and national chains. And we employ over 150,000 Canadians coast to coast to coast. and we serve over 6 million members. We've been decimated by COVID-19, the closures and the restrictions. So just to give some context, if a facility is able to be open, they're operating around 50% of pre-COVID levels. If they're forced to close, they're operating at 0 to 10%, depending on their online presence. We still have fixed cost bases. We will applaud the federal government for the CEWS and the CERS program. That has been very well received and appreciated. However, there are still other costs that we do incur. Little consideration has been given to new startup businesses who opened in January or February 2020. And regional chains with multiple locations, the fact that their CERS is capped is still on the hook for the balance of their rent. So at the end of the day, after government supports, facilities are still losing between $15,000 and $30,000 per month. We have asked the provincial governments for industry-specific support. I'm here today to talk about how we as an industry can be part of the collective health and wellness of Canadians and do our part to help with the national recovery. We're not here to ask for a bailout, we're here to be part of the solution. We know that exercise has a multitude of benefits. It reduces hypertension by 33 to 60%, reduces diabetes, reduces cardiovascular disease, reduces risks of stroke, colon cancer, breast cancer, Alzheimer's. It reduces the impacts of anxiety and depression. And we also know that COVID-19 unfortunately has significant impacts for those that have one or more of these chronic conditions. So how can we be part of the solution? Post-COVID, what we're looking to do is ask the federal government and PHAC to expand the Prescription to Get Active program across Canada. So for those that don't know about the program, it's based out of Alberta, and it links primary care, so your physician, with the fitness and recreation options in your community. We have no cost, low cost. We have fitness facilities. We have remote options for those that are in a rural or rural remote area or just simply aren't interested in joining a facility. So we want to expand this program. It is turnkey, but also flexible to accommodate various geographical regions of Canada. For example, Northern Ontario is much different than downtown Vancouver. We are also asking the federal government to have fitness expenses, fitness memberships and services considered a medical expense. So on your personal tax return, including fitness as a medical expense. We have the ability to provide attendance reports in terms of auditability, and we have professionals from coast to coast to coast who are ready, willing, and able to serve Canadians to help build sustainable behavior change to ensure that we create healthy and active lifestyles. And the infrastructure already exists. This truly is a stroke of the pen change that we're asking for. And by doing so, we believe that we can provide the government a significant return on investment, over 500%, when we can move somebody with a chronic condition from sedentary to physically active in terms of reducing the overall burden on the healthcare system, inspiring Canadians to take proactive steps towards their own health and wellness. We will get many of our young people back to work. Our industry employs many young people. We have colleges and university programs across the country that do a fabulous job creating fitness professionals. They will have a viable industry to enter, and we'll get many of our folks that we've had to lay off back to work, and we will rebuild our industry. As I mentioned earlier, we have incurred significant amounts of debt. Many operators are now well over $200,000 to $250,000 in debt. And by adding the fitness as a tax deduction, we believe we can get more people into our industry and help us pay back those debt amounts. So in summary, we're here today to be part of the solution. We'd like to partner with government, and we look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wilderman. We go now to Tri-City Transition Society. Ms. Metz Murray, Executive Director, please go ahead. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable members, I'm delighted to be here today with you to talk to you about the impacts of COVID-19 in the world of domestic violence or intimate partnership violence or violence in relationships, whatever title you wish to give it. I appreciate being invited to the committee. Tri-City Transitions is a 46-year-old organization serving women, children, youth, and men for 46 years. We first began as a woman serving organization. In the early 2000s, we saw that helping women and children and youth, we could help them all we wanted. However, Band-Aids were running out. And so in 2006, we began to provide services to men, because domestic violence is not just a community and woman's issue, it's also a man's issue. And there generally are two parties to domestic violence. So in the world of COVID-19, our services changed somewhat from what we were earlier offering. Now, our services include a transition house for women and children fleeing domestic violence. We also offer counseling services for women. We offer counseling services for children ages 3 to 18 and their caregivers, whether that's parents, grandparents, foster parents, whatever the caregiver definition includes. We also offer a victim service program for women, children, youth, and men who are impacted by domestic violence and where domestic violence becomes a criminal matter. And as well, what we are also offering now is a mentor relationship program for men. Now, all of these services have been impacted as a result of COVID-19. What we have done in serving the community of the Tri-Cities, and generally we serve between 1,500 to 2,000 families a year. Most of our employees are local, and the majority of our workforce is women. What we did at the beginning of COVID was we decided to help the broader community and opened up our phone lines to provide emotional support to whomever might need it. In addition, we very quickly put our services to virtual services, whether it be phone, whether it be Zoom and other technology. What we discovered when we originally had staff go home to provide services from home and work from home was staff actually asked to come back to work in our offices. Now, our services were deemed essential. Our main office is such that we were able to physically distance. We have safety protocols in place, and we also realized for the health and welfare for our staff that it was important that everybody be in the same building. We have been very successful in remaining COVID-free this whole time period. But part and parcel of what we saw in this past year and continue to see is the impact that COVID has had, the lockdowns have had on families. As I listen to everyone else speak this morning, we speak looking at the environment, but the key in all of this is family, regardless of whatever that dynamic may be. What we saw here at Tri-Cities was an increase in sexual assaults. Sexual assaults were not only adults 19 and older. What we saw an increase in was in youth and children. That's not a surprise given the fact that suddenly families find themselves at home together, unemployed, perhaps both partners are unemployed, having to educate children, and if there's been any issues within a relationship, they will surface very quickly. But what that's also meant for people is that it has stopped women from reaching out for services. They will reach out via perhaps email, but they won't reach out via phone because their partner is in the home or in the same room. And so we know that there has been a lot of domestic violence happening where people haven't been reaching out for services. But in that whole process of reaching out, one of the biggest things that we saw was just the lack for sexual assaults. So we have moved forward to find ways that we can find funding to help people directly when they are impacted by sexual assaults. And as we move forward, we truly want to be part of the solution because families, whatever that dynamic may be, make up the fabric of Canada. And so it's to remove the barriers when we're looking at domestic violence, remove those barriers that limit us from funding men's programs. That's one of our asks, is that men too need to have services in order to decrease domestic violence. So with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Matsmurray. We will start our rounds of questions now. We will start, I believe it's with Mr. McGuire. Mr. McGuire, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all of our witnesses today for their presentations. Just wanted to, first of all, just go back to Dr. Berry for a moment from Radiologists Association, and it's good to speak with you again. I know that the ask of $1.5 billion was something that we had put on the table in the last election, but to purchase MRIs and CTs, you're very short, and you're making a very good point that some of those, much of those, I think you used the number 75% are near their end of life as far as that equipment goes. And even though you're still doing a lot of work from home, you're still well behind in the types of scans that we're able to do. Can you just elaborate on that? And perhaps let us tell our committee how long it takes to put that kind of equipment in place, and if there's any roadblocks from regulations that we could look at as well.
Thanks for the question, and again, thanks for the opportunity. And I'll just say that Dr. Soulé has arrived. Thanks, Jill, for making it. I'll make a few comments on the wait lists and whatnot. The equipment is readily available in the marketplace, and the turnaround time on these, the investment turnaround time in the last cycle, 2005, 2006, was about 3 years, and it ramped up, and it made about a 7 to 10 year improvement in the wait lists on CT and MRI, cardiology, interventional radiology, and things like, things to that nature. The targeting will be a lot of the screening that's been done, particularly mammography, is less than 50% of our mammo screening has been reduced because of COVID and the intimate location of where you have when you're screening with mammography. The technologists in particular are very exposed to patients, so they were reduced to about 10% of their workload at that time. And then just basically, when you have a COVID patient that comes into our CAT scan or MRI, it takes fully 1 hour to turn it around. There's a COVID protocol based on ventilation and cleaning with Lysol, and then the room has to sit for an hour afterwards. So I was on call a few weekends ago, and we had a COVID patient, the St. John Regional Emergency, and we fortunately have 2 scanners. So I had to use the older scanner, which was about 9 years old, and it was a routine which wouldn't really compromise diagnostic capability, keep the trauma scanner open. But once we did that patient, we did the patient. That took 15 minutes. 15 minutes to clean the patient, clean it, and then we had downtime of about an hour as the room had to ventilate. If you're in a smaller center than we have, you could shut down the whole scanner for the whole day. So if you're having people coming through the hospital on a daily basis, you can see how the wait list would get extended just based on the COVID patients, and then the reduction in volumes.
So that relates to the second part of your ask as well, and in regards to the rooms and the types of facilities that you need to work in as well. I just wanted to go back to the cancer issue. You were looking at you were mentioning that there's we've got a huge backlog here, hundreds of thousands. I think it's 330,000 backlog of situations that need to be dealt with right away, of elective surgeries and that sort of thing. But more in the diagnostics area, the extended. Can you just refer again to the extensions on the cancer patients? And is it a situation of getting the equipment into areas that need it more? Are there areas in Canada that are greater risk or have a vacuum of equipment that could be dealt with? Or is there technology today to be able to take those scans and move them into another area where a radiologist doesn't have to be there with the person when their imaging are being done?
There is. We're short in man. It's a complex question, but where there's people, there's cancer, and where there's cancer and people in communities, there's imaging departments and hospitals. And most people are prepared to travel to some degree, 50, 60 miles an hour, longer, not much more than that. In New Brunswick and the Maritimes, most people have a CAT scan and MRI within about an hour. In other communities, not so much. But if people in northern communities needed imaging, we do that already because we have the bandwidth to really transfer without too much difficulty. And it's basically getting up-to-date equipment in a rapid fashion and getting this backlog of hundreds of thousands of patients scanned and getting existing, and then we're talking about recheck cancers of lungs and colons that haven't been done as well as the patients. The 6-month protocol may have been extended to 12 months. Again, I can go in a million directions, and I don't want to take up all the committee's time.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to maybe just ask a last one in regards to your opinion as to some provinces that have done a better job of adjusting their diagnostic imaging departments due to the pandemic. Is there kind of keeping their wait times as small as possible? Are there examples that we could use there and follow up on, or what's the best, your best knowledge too, just to finalize that? You know of any COVID outbreaks happening in the diagnostic imaging in Canada? You've made a very good case for things being well controlled, but are there areas of concern?
I know that Alberta just put a whack of money into wait lists for imaging, which we were pleased to see because they've been hit hard. I'm not as familiar about Quebec and Ontario, who've been also hotspots. But I suspect when the dust settles and this third wave, that I've talked to people like last week in the Hamilton area, and their volumes were down 50% already as they head back into the third wave with the variants and lack of vaccination. So it's really a moving target. All I know is that we were quite bad off before this started. We started to stabilize, and then we went into the second wave, and now here we are. So it's such a moving target. It's not better, I can assure you that, and I suspect it'll be a lot worse.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. We'll go now to Ms. O'Connell. Ms. O'Connell, please go ahead. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I have questions for all of you, but I'm not sure if I'll get through them, so I'll try as quickly as I can. Dr. Barry, I might as well start where you left off. Certainly, I hear your point about the need for equipment pre-COVID and wait lists, but also you mentioned in your testimony that Atlantic Canada, for example, isn't hit as hard. Is that due to the fact that they've had a zero COVID mentality or near zero COVID mentality, and provinces have put in place restrictions to really limit COVID? And then where I come from in Ontario, we're seeing places like Sick Kids Hospital actually preparing beds for ICU, and the direct correlation where doctors were warning back in February that if reopening happened too quickly, too soon, that we were going to see hospital rooms and ICU fill up. So you mentioned in your testimony Atlantic Canada, the example, and the direct correlation that not getting COVID contained is going to have long-term health impacts outside of just COVID. We're going to see, as you mentioned, issues around screening and prevention and treatments in other areas. And so the focus around containing COVID to ensure that everybody is able to access health care in the ways that we are seeing in other jurisdictions.
I couldn't have said it better, Mr. O'Connell. You've hit it right on the head. Direct correlation. Maritimes in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, we're at about 93% last year's volumes in radiology. Not so much in Ontario, Quebec, BC, and Alberta. So not to waste your time and the committee's time, you've nailed it. You're right on. It's direct correlation.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Ms. Metz and domestic violence. Thank you for being here and sharing this and the correlations the impacts you're seeing with COVID and describing what's been happening. And so I guess moving forward, I understand in terms of the needs of support and the lack of reporting or people reaching out. What are some areas do you find are there successes that we can help support, for example, because we need to understand what's happening. We need to know whether it's sexual assault and domestic violence and who that's impacting so that we can get supports to those people. So is there a way that we can help reach out to people? I come from a semi-rural riding, and I know we try to do some different outreach versus just having clients kind of come to us in the local organizations. Is there something we can do to help support, to find who these victims are, how to get their support, and as you mentioned, support to men so that these abuses are not happening in the first place? Could you maybe elaborate on some ideas there?
Thank you very much for the question. That's a broad question when I look across Canada and how we can reach out to people. The communities, the rural communities are much more challenged in reaching out to victims of domestic violence just because of the remoteness. So one of the things for me when I'm looking at the remote communities is to have bandwidth that is up to date so that people can call. And one of the things as well, just thinking back to rural communities, because I was raised in a rural community, it's also having services available in the local communities, whether that's in partnership with another organization, rather than someone having to travel for 50 kilometers or 60 kilometers or even 20 kilometers when you're fleeing domestic violence. When it comes to services for men, one of the things that, as I said, we have started to offer the Mentor Relationship Program, which continues to look for funding in a variety of different places to be able to offer that program. That program is a huge success. If I had the time, I would share stories with you as I have seen men transform their lives because they too want to make a difference and they too want to be part of their family.
Thank you so much for getting a lot in a short amount of time. And if I have time for one more, I'll ask Mr. Wildeman, just quickly on your ideas, and thank you for sharing them with us. Certainly fitness and health is going to be critical for recovery. In terms of the fitness expenses, would you have some proposal for some type of accreditation similar to massage therapists, for example, with personal benefits or employment benefits? I would think there would be concerns if even to your industry and your membership that if people all of a sudden, started claiming they were personal fitness instructors and kind of flooding the industry. Do you have ideas to help prevent that so that your members, in terms of the rebuild, and there would be some sort of check and balance in place for the government to review this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as an industry, we are self-regulated currently. There's a number of registries in place. So folks who have a fitness certification can be identified. Public can actually search the registry and see if their fitness professional is actually accredited. As an industry association, we work with all the different certification agencies, and we are looking at ensuring that the public know where to go to find a qualified fitness professional. Australia has a very good model, and we hope to emulate that, where there's a tiered certification program. And we have great certification agencies from coast to coast, and we definitely can leverage them. So I think there does need to be a check and balance and some sort of proof of purchase and proof of certification, and that does exist today, and those registries are in place.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Nous allons maintenant à Monsieur Thériault. Monsieur Thériault.
Mr. Thériault now, go ahead, you have the floor. 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for their presentations. I'll begin with Dr. Soulez and Dr. Berry. Thank you for accepting our invitation on this topic of the collateral impacts of the pandemic, especially in regards to patients, non-COVID patients, because the pandemic has presented two categories of patients, COVID patients and non-COVID patients. There's no medicine without diagnosis, so your expertise is very relevant in establishing a diagnosis. So for an overview, you identified earlier needs of $1.5 billion as an investment in equipment. Do you believe that those needs could be met if right away, rather than later on in the future, there were major investments in healthcare transfers, first of all, and second, well, first let's begin with that. Thank you very much for that great question. Excuse me, Mr. Soulez. Your microphone isn't selected. Can you hear me? Go ahead. On your left, Mr. Soulez, on your left, you have to select the microphone because the sound is very bad. Okay, I'll take it out of the system then. Do you hear me better now? No. You need the headset. It's on the left. You have to select the microphone. It is selected. Planetronics. You need to select Planetronics. It needs to be connected. Okay, headset Planetronics is on. It's on. I'm sorry. I'll try again. Do you hear me? Yes. We can hear you. All right, go ahead. All right, I'm sorry for the sound issues. So that's a very good question. The point, as Dr. Mike Berry said very well, is that there was already a delay in investments before the pandemic. So there is a need for investment because we were under the OECD average regarding equipment. So the COVID crisis means that the flow decreased during the worst of COVID, but even currently we haven't made up to 100%. In the best case scenario, it's 80 to 90%, but mostly 80%. So that backlog is increasing. Now, in terms of the type of investment, it's clear there's equipment, but there are also other areas for that 1.5 billion. There's human resources, of course, because the province's needs are different. Certain provinces have a major lack of equipment. for example, the Atlantic provinces. It's very clear. And Calgary has more problems. Alberta needs equipment. So other provinces need human resources. All of the equipment is being used at 100%. So people are going in at night when possible. So we need strategies to train the technicians who operate the machines, and we need to keep them at home, which isn't always easy. The last point that we need to invest in, and that's essential, is all of the IT, the information technology. Most provinces don't have a central repository for those wait lists, so we can't allocate patients in an intelligent way. We don't even have a real-time idea of the state of emergency. So this is very important. And the last point, in terms of the investment, is we need to choose the right tool for the right patient. So IT can guide the family doctor in choosing the best exam for the right patient so that it's always 100% useful. So before the first wave, there was already a wait list. And then after the first wave, there was even more of a backlog that wasn't caught up during the second wave, and it's gone on with the third wave. And so there are people who will be suffering the impacts of that, and that seems clear to you. That's clear, right? Yes. Yes, there are people who are going to not get the diagnosis they need, and that could lead to additional costs to the healthcare system. Is that correct? Yes, exactly. We need to see this as a clinical reality. We have 4 priorities. The top priority are the emergencies, same day. Second, within a week. P3 should be within a month, and that's where the trouble starts. That would be someone who has a vague intestinal issue. Most of the time, 90% of the time, it's not a big deal, but in 10% of the time, it's a big deal. P3 should be done within a month, but now it's 3 to 6 months. And then P4 is typically a patient waiting for a knee replacement, a hip replacement, and that should be done within 3 months. But currently it's nearly a year, sometimes longer. So these are people who can't work, who are suffering, who don't have access to treatment. In addition, sometimes the exam needs to be redone because there's been too much time between the diagnosis. So sometimes you have to do 2 exams. In certain cases with cancer, isn't it the case that pushing the diagnosis back means that the cancer is worse? And then you would need greater medical intervention that's much more costly. Yes, exactly. That 1 month wait, that may be reasonable. Well, with cancer, things are accelerated. But before you do the scan, you don't know whether it's cancer. So most of those people in the P3 category, rather than being seen in a month, it's 3 to 6 months. And those people might have more aggressive cancer. And rather than having a surgery that can cure them, they end up with chemotherapy and worse outcomes. So Quebec and the provinces have to provide this care. They need things to be foreseeable. The government should be investing to get through the crisis, and they say that afterward they'll deal with health transfers. Based on what's been said, do you think that's a mistake? Should there not be massive investments now? This is an issue of $28 billion to help healthcare networks. What I can tell you from working in my hospital, patients who don't have COVID are really suffering from COVID, from the crisis. We need to address non-COVID patients very seriously, because even before, the healthcare system was underfinanced in human resources and equipment. Currently, we may see deaths that outpace COVID. It's not impossible. Thank you. My time is up. Thank you, Mr. Tidio.
We go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Ms. McQuaig, I think it's a fair comment to say that one of the most profound problems that faced our country in terms of vaccine rollout was our lack of domestic production capacity. And as you pointed out, the current Liberal government is negotiating a private model relating to domestic production. Why do you have so little confidence that Ottawa and Sanofi Pasteur can negotiate a contract that would give Canadians priority access to the vaccines and medication that we need?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Davies. It's not even that I have little confidence. It's that when we're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars of public money, we have to have more than just confidence. We have to have certainty. We have to have real rules in place. And what alarms me so deeply about this $415 million investment the government is making in Sanofi is that there seem to be no restrictions. There seem to be no strings attached. That they say they're negotiating this contract with Sanofi. Hopefully, it's going to mean we'll get what we want. We'll get that priority access for Canadians. But without that being really clarified and clearly nailed down, it's just dreaming, and that's a tremendous amount of money to be dreaming about. I would also just add that, I think this whole thinking is based on a fundamental misconception that we often see on the part of people in government, and that is that the interests of government and private business are fundamentally the same. That is just wrong. The interests of business and private and the interests of government and business are really quite different. Business, the top priority is profit maximization for the company. And the people running the company ultimately answer to their shareholders who want to be made richer. I'm not even saying this to criticize private companies. This is what they're all about. Whereas government answers ultimately to the people, to the voters. If they don't defend the public interests that the voters want, they will end up getting defeated, getting kicked out of government. So my whole point is there's a different set of interests involved. And the way the Trudeau government is approaching this way, throwing $415 million at Sanofi, is just way too trusting. It's based on some notion that they have the same interests that we do. They do not have the same interests. And we have to be much more careful. And even more important, we'd be much smarter to not go this private route and instead go the public route, where we, as we saw with Connaught, we were able to control what happened with Connaught. It turned out to be a wonderful situation where this was an enormously successful company, provided vaccines for Canadians at cost, just use their profits to reinvest in research. This was a spectacular example, and I think the point is we should be more aware of that history and more excited by what was achieved with it and more interested in investigating, couldn't we try that again?
Well, you anticipated where I was going, which was to move to Connaught Labs. As you pointed out, it appears that it's a pretty common ground that it was a huge success and was pivotal in producing vaccines for diphtheria, polio, and diabetes as well, providing those medicines at affordable prices for millions of Canadians, and in fact selling at cheap cost to the rest of the world. But I'm wondering, in 2021, what steps should we take, or would you recommend that we take, to replicate that success today and moving forward?
Yeah, I guess I would say there's two key things that I think we should keep very much in mind, and that is that one of I mean, there was you described the success of Connaught. There was a reason that Connaught was so successful. And one of those reasons was it was very explicitly, right from the beginning, committed to the public good. It stated its goals very clearly as making medication affordable and available to all who needed it. Now, that's a public interest definition. That's very different than what private pharmaceuticals do. So I think that inspired loyalty in its staff and in scientists. The other thing I'll just say quickly is that Connaught was based at a university. It was based at the University of Toronto. It expanded way beyond that. But that meant it could draw on the expertise at the university, the scientific expertise, and in fact, they could share research with private pharmaceutical companies. There tends to be this unwillingness to share with other scientists. It's proprietary information, whereas Connaught wasn't like that at all. They were constantly contributing to other medical advances. They became a hub for scientific inquiry, and I think that's very important, that if we go back to recreating Connaught, that we once again replicate that model with the real hub of scientific innovation and collaboration with other scientists.
Thank you. It appears I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. So that brings our rounds of questions for this panel to an end, and I believe that concludes our business for the day. I thank the witnesses for your time and your expertise and sharing your wisdom with us.
Mr. Chair, we could have done another 2 minutes, another round of 2 minutes. We still have a little bit of time left, if everyone agrees.
Sure, we could do 30-second shots if everyone wants. We'll start then with, I believe, Mr. D'Entremont for 30 seconds, please.
Thank you. And my question to Dr. Barry or Dr. Soulez would be just simply, we know that we're already backed up in wait times when it comes to diagnostic imaging. Just how far back has COVID brought us?
If you look at patients, and I think Gilles has dealt with that quite successfully, particularly the P3s, I suspect it's more than 380,000 people backlogged in the system, if that's one raw number. I think Nova Scotia is probably in New Brunswick are better shape than the rest of the country. I think the economic cost is upwards of $5 billion a year of not letting people get back to work, being off the payroll, home, with all the social issues around that, staying at home and not being productive. Certainly more than 380,000. How you quantify it, we'll know more as we study it again after this third wave. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. D'Entremont. Ms. Sidhu, please go ahead, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Ms. Metz. As we have said, the federal government has been there for support Canadians, providing 8 out of every $10. Can you tell, did you notice the impact of these support on Canadians?
In COVID in the last year, there certainly was an increase in support from the federal government through where we noticed the biggest support coming was through the Canadian Women's Shelter Foundation, and that came from federal dollars. And so that certainly has helped us over the past year. And that support has also helped us to boost the services for sexual assault victims.
Oui, vous êtes sur mute, Monsieur le Président.
You're on mute, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair.
Désolé.
I'm sorry. We'll now go to Mr. Thériault. Mr. Thériault, 30 seconds. Dr. Soulez, on the importance of reviewing and reconfiguring appointments and AI investments. Yes, very quickly. As you know, in most provinces. As you know, in most Canadian provinces, there's no central appointment making or system that would set out priorities for appointments. So currently, there are a number of systems that ensure that all appointments requested at the first line are the right ones. And then we need to improve patient experience. Currently, probably all of you have had appointments that you receive in the mail or by fax, and that it doesn't fit with your schedule as a worker. And I think we should have an internet system where people can take their schedule into account, where information on contradictions can be taken into account. So we're very much behind in that respect. We need to improve our IT, and then we can analyze our workflow and optimize the process from the beginning to the end. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Tidio.
Mr. Davies, please go ahead, 30 seconds.
Thanks, Ms. McQuaig. Canada seems to be opposing the move at the WTO to override private patent rights for COVID vaccines so poor countries can get access to COVID vaccines. What's your comment on that?
I think it's such a terrible position for Canada to be taking. Canada's essentially siding with big pharma, which wants to protect their patent rights. And frankly, it's quite out of line with what Trudeau would normally be expected to do. He's very interested in his image as a progressive. I think what this speaks to is the fact that, the federal government, the Trudeau government, is very anxious to satisfy, to kind of do what the big pharmaceutical companies want because Canada feels so vulnerable when we don't have a vaccine supply of our own. I think this is, just exactly the kind of problem that we would be correcting when we actually recreated something like Connaught Labs. We shouldn't be so much at the mercy of the big pharmaceutical companies, which is what we are. The other thing that the big pharmaceutical companies are very anxious to push on the Canadian government, and I can see them, Sanofi, trying to use the negotiations with Ottawa over this to push for Trudeau to back off from the changes he's announced to the patented medicines regulations, changes that are designed to reduce the price of drugs by billions of dollars for Canadians. So let's not end up getting a vaccine supply through a private supplier like Sanofi in exchange for giving up the right to bring down drug prices in Canada. That'd be a terrible trade-off.
Thank you. Mr. Theriault, I see your hand is raised. Do you wish to speak, or have you already done so? Mr. Davies, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you.
J'avais ma main levée avant, Monsieur.
I had my hand raised earlier, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Davies, we'll go with Mr. Theriault. Mr. Theriault, go ahead.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, it was just to organize our upcoming work. This morning, we had 2 notices of motion. On Friday, we missed a meeting that was supposed to be held in relation to the motion 106.4. So we should know what to expect on Friday, witnesses to come. Do you have an idea of upcoming work?
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Désolé. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we have confirmation of witnesses that we had wanted to have for our meeting last week are confirmed for Friday. So we will have that meeting on Friday. And we will then carry on with our schedule as we had previously decided, which will be to carry on with the block portion of the COVID-19 study. And at some point in in the next month, we will schedule the minister for estimates as well. Does that answer your questions?
Excusez-moi.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. The interpretation wasn't clear, so I hadn't understood that there were witnesses for Friday. So that's why I asked the question. Thank you very much.
Mr. Davies, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you've answered. I just want to clarify. So all of the witnesses that were supposed to schedule for last week will be scheduled for this Friday.
I'll actually have to ask the clerk about that. I understand that both ministers are available, as well as Dr. Quashtan. Dr. Quashtan and at least one of the ministers were not available last week. Mr. Clerk, if you could advise.
Well, I was not aware that the minister will have received any confirmation from my contact in the department, so I don't know. Last week I was told that. Sorry, the minister. The ministers, Mr. Annan was available, but I haven't received any confirmation from the minister, so I don't know. I will ask and I will. Go ahead.
I believe there were 5 witnesses, if my memory serves correct, that were requested. There was Minister Haidu, Minister Anand, Mr. Stewart, Dr. Quash, and Dr. Tam. I think those are the 5. So if we're scheduling for Friday, again, I think we need to know pretty quickly whether some or all of those witnesses are going to be attending.
Yeah, we will verify that as soon as we can, and we will get back to the committee. Ms. Rempel-Garner, please go ahead.
Why wasn't the meeting scheduled as stated in the motion? Like, I understand that the ministers can choose to appear or not, but why didn't you schedule the meeting?
The motion was for us to invite the ministers and those other witnesses for a meeting on that day. We did so. The ministers were not able to attend. Dr. Quashtan was not able to attend. I therefore felt it was not appropriate to hold the meeting on that day. I felt it was more the will of the committee to hear from these witnesses than to have a meeting just for the sake of having a meeting. And
so just to be clear, Chair, you unilaterally decided to overrule a motion of the committee. I understand that the people might not show up, but there was direction given to you by the committee to hold a meeting. And what you just said is that you felt, based on your feelings, that you couldn't avail yourself of scheduling a meeting that the committee ordered you to schedule.
I believe the motion was to invite the ministers and other witnesses for a meeting on a specific date, and we did that.
You felt like you didn't have to schedule the meeting. You felt feelings.
I believe I fulfilled the terms of the motion.
I don't think we had the meeting, so I would beg to differ, but I guess your feelings prevail.
You're on mute, Ron.
You are on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. That's not exactly what I said. I said that it is the, as far as I'm concerned, we fulfilled the terms of the motion, which was, in fact, to invite the ministers and other witnesses for a meeting on that date, which we did. The ministers, of course, were not able to make it, and neither was Dr. Quashtan. And I believe there was potentially a problem with television coverage for such a meeting last week as well. In any case, we will do our best to have this meeting on Friday, and hopefully we can resolve the questions and information that is hoped for from the ministers and other witnesses at that time. Ms. O'Connell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Despite Ms. Rempel-Gardner's comments about your feelings, she's just absolutely wrong. The committee passed a motion requesting the appearance of officials and ministers on a specific date. They weren't available, and you as chair fulfilled the committee's request which was to hold a meeting with those ministers and officials. And because her feelings are hurt that she didn't get the date she wanted, but the business of this committee and Canadians moves forward despite when she wants it. And I think the testimony of having the ministers and officials is far more important. So if there are any feelings at play here, I suggest the member opposite just get on with doing the committee's work as you have so appropriately done. And I look forward to that meeting on Friday.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Is there any other? Mr. Davies, please go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that, I mean, given that we have witnesses here, we probably should defer this conversation to another time. But I do believe that we do have to have a discussion about the proper protocol going forward. I don't agree, with great respect to what Ms. O'Connell said, or frankly, Mr. Chair, with what you said. We passed a motion that gave 1 week to have a meeting within 1 week, and we invited 5 witnesses. And I don't think the obligation is to simply send out invitations, and if no one shows, we don't have a meeting. I do believe that the proper approach there should have been to schedule a meeting, and we could have then at that meeting decided what the next step was. But we had the tail wagging the dog. Witnesses don't control this committee. Witnesses appearing or not appearing don't determine whether this committee sits. This committee determines when we sit. And we had an 11-0 motion, including the Liberals, passed a motion to hold a meeting within 1 week with those witnesses. I also find it passingly coincidental that 5 out of 5 witnesses could not appear on the same day at the same time, including Ms. Tam, Ms. Quash, Mr. Stewart, and the 2 ministers. Frankly, what if witnesses never want to appear? Do we never sit? I also think it's an important accountability mechanism. If we call this meeting and no witnesses show up, it gives us a chance to question why that is. I would also point out that this committee received not a word of notice from the chair at all until the 11th hour. After 1 week, at 6 days and 23 hours, we were notified that the meeting wouldn't take place. There was no attempt to notify the members of this committee of what the witnesses' response would have been so that we could have made an adjustment. Perhaps we could have met on Thursday or Friday of last week, but we weren't given that chance because of the unilateral decision of the chair. So I do think we do have to have a conversation about this. This is not about feelings, this on anybody's part. This is about respect for this committee, and when this committee passes a motion to hold a meeting, that motion should be respected. And if witnesses do or don't appear, then that's up for the committee to determine how that's handled. That's my 2 cents, but perhaps we can have a special meeting where we can make sure this doesn't happen again. But I think that's important to set the record straight on this.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. I take your point about the witnesses. I would really like to thank the witnesses for their attendance here today, and please do feel free to withdraw if that is your wish. I would also say, Mr. Davies, that I did not say that all 5 witnesses could not come on Wednesday. I do know that at least one or both of the ministers, as well as Dr. Quashtan, could not attend. Anyway, I'll give them. I'll turn it over to Ms. O'Connell again, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Once again, Mr. Chair, I understand the position of Mr. Davies to want to discuss this, but frankly, the rules around what a chair can and cannot do are established, and it is the job and the role of a chair to call meetings based on the direction of the committee, and the chair acted exactly in that fashion. If members of this committee don't like those rules, then they should take it up procedurally at PROC or within the House, because those are the standing orders and the chair has that authority to do so. In addition to that, if members wanted, I've never seen a committee, if members asked for specific witnesses and they were not available, that a meeting just be held and we all just sit there. And if that was the direction of the motion, that if witnesses were not available, that the meeting be held anyways, then the drafters of that motion should have written that in. But you can't go back on a poorly written motion or a motion that didn't encompass all of the things you wanted and now blame the chair for not being able to read your mind into understanding what should happen in the event witnesses are not available. We can invite witnesses, but we can not control their schedules. So if the intention was to have a meeting despite not having witnesses, then that should have been included in the motion. And coulda, woulda, shoulda, you had to come forward and have that stipulated because the chair followed the direction of the motion as written, and the standing orders are the rules that govern the responsibilities of the chair. So if those rules are something that you want to review, then there is an appropriate way to do so. But blaming the chair for fulfilling his role is not appropriate, and blaming the chair for something that's not written as part of the motion, also not appropriate.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. I also would remark regarding the matter of notice that I did not hear definitively that the ministers could not attend until Tuesday, and the committee was informed as soon as possible thereafter. We have Ms. Rempel-Garner, please go ahead.
So Chair, to be clear, there were witnesses that were able to attend per the outline in the notice. That's what you said. So some were able to attend.
I didn't say that. I said that I have only knowledge that the ministers could not, at least one of the ministers couldn't attend, as well as Dr. Quashtan. I don't know if the other witnesses were able to attend or not.
Did you ask them?
You know, the clerk reaches out to those to the witnesses and
clerk. Did you ask the other witnesses on the list?
Yes, of course.
And were they able to attend?
They didn't say no. I just got an email saying that Dr. Tam and Mr. Stewart were available on this Friday, the 16th. So they didn't say no, but they said they were only available next week, so the week after.
So it seems like the story has changed here, Chair. At first you said that the ministers weren't available and you weren't going to call the meeting, and then but then in your response to Mr. Davies, you said that there were some people available. It sounds like you really didn't press to get an answer, and if somebody was available, I'm not sure why you unilaterally decided to not have the meeting. It seems curious to me. I will just say this, that chairs, per the standing orders, chairs have to follow directions given by a committee. And I think that there's a little bit of a changing story here. If I had to surmise, I think this is what happened. I think that the ministers decided that they didn't want to attend per the terms of the motion. And I will note that the ministers did find time to speak on a political panel at the Liberal Committee last week. They were both there at the same time. So that was a priority. I think that's interesting. So I think that they probably said they can't attend. And then it was, well, let's not have the meeting at all, because they didn't want to face the political consequences of not showing up to a meeting, given the gravity of the matter that was compelled. And Chair, I think that, it's very interesting that you decided not to hold the meeting. I think that, and again, given that your story's changed a couple times here, it's disappointing. I think we deserve better. So I find it odd. And that's all I'll say on that.
Ms. Rempel-Garner, you're putting words into my mouth. Mr. Rempel-Garner, you're putting words in my mouth. The story has not changed.
I'm happy to check the
I said that the ministers and Dr. Quashtan, at least one of the ministers and Dr. Quashtan could not appear. I made no assertion regarding the other witnesses for last week's proposed meeting. Mr. Davies, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I find myself unclear as to what's being said as well. I guess I have some remarks, but first I just want to ask the clerk, did any of the witnesses get back to you and say that they could attend the meeting on Wednesday last week?
No. Dr. Quash was not available, and all the three names I gave on the for the 16th, and the ministers were not available. I got an email saying that they could not make it for the 7th.
All 5 people got back to you and said none of them could make the 7th?
Well, Dr. Quash could not attend, ministers, and the Dr. Tam and Mr. Stewart, I didn't get an email saying that they could not come. I just got an email saying that they were coming on the 16th.
Well, see, this is...
They were available on the 16th.
This is confusing to me. We passed a motion that said 1 week before saying we want to call these 5 witnesses to a meeting on or before the 7th. And you're saying that witnesses get back to you and say, I can come on the 16th? And it's funny, we've had Ms. Tam come before this committee, I would say 10 times in the past 3 years. She has never been unavailable. I have to also say that we gave these witnesses 1 week's notice, a full week for all 5 of these people. And I understand the ministers, by the way. That's ministers, I understand their schedules are much tighter. Although I am troubled a bit by the fact that only 1 minister got back and said she couldn't make it. Did Ms. Haidu get back and say she could or couldn't make it? But when we have bureaucrats like Mr. Stewart and Dr. Tam, my experience has been if we ask them to appear before this committee on 1 week's notice, that they can generally do that. So anyway, this is kind of water under the bridge, but I do think that this committee does need to understand what the proper protocol going forward is. I, for one, would have appreciated having the meeting anyway and having a report back from the chair and the clerk about what had happened, because you have to remember that the motion did say that we would have this meeting on or before the 7th. There's actually no provision to respond to Ms. O'Connell. If we're going to get extremely denotative and literal about motions, there is nothing in that motion that says that the meeting can happen after the 7th. So how the chair is taking it upon himself to unilaterally schedule the meeting for this Friday coming up when the motion clearly said that couldn't happen is also beyond me. So we need to figure out how we're going to do this. I, for one, would rather we say we have the meeting and then we could have determined what the best way forward would have been. It may have been to proceed with 1 of the witnesses or 2, or maybe to pick another time to schedule. That's my only point about this. But I think it's better if we move as a committee with these situations. I understand these things do happen, and I understand that the clerk and the chair were doing their best to carry out the point of the motion. But that's just my suggestion moving forward is that would be a better approach to involve the committee in this decision.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. We go to Mr. Van Bynen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm hearing a lot of language around how we should respect the committee, and perhaps respecting the committee also involves making sure that we have all our witnesses available when we call a meeting. I don't think that there's any positive outcome in speculating or even sowing or imagining a scenario that has a surreptitious outcome or a surreptitious motive. I think this committee is committed to finding solutions. This committee is committed to going forward and making sure that there's a productive use of our time, of all the committees, and I think that's a respect that we should have. Some of this partisan posturing is counterproductive. I would suggest that maybe all of us take the time to read the book entitled Tear Down, Rebuilding Democracy from the Ground Up by Dave Meslin. This partisanship is so counterproductive to all of us. Why don't we focus on finding good solutions? I think there are procedures in place, but procedural gymnastics are unproductive. Let's settle on the intent of having a positive outcome and going forward. It's really disappointing to see that we're even having this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I therefore declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.